Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Maldonado, aka the Glam Reaper herself. On today's episode, I meet another fabulously named woman, the Grave Woman, and as quiet in some ways as that name sounds, Joél is anything but quiet. And today we're talking diversity, culture within the funeral community, and getting women seen on stage. Let's take it away. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Glam Reaper Podcast. I am very excited. I love when I get somebody on my podcast that has a kind of a nickname like I do. So while I'm known as the Glam Reaper, I have as my guest today the Grave Woman. So now I have a question. Is it Joél or Joel, or tell me about your name? Tell me about yourself, but tell me about your name.
It's Joél. Thank you for
Oh,
asking.
Joél, lovely. No problem. Absolutely. So, Joél, you are the Grave Woman.
Yes.
Incredible. I want to know where you got your name and what do you do? Tell us about you and your fabulousness.
Okay, so I'll start with a story. The name
Yes.
is actually a form of self-fulfilling prophecy. I drew a picture when I was 8 years old in this very house that I'm in right now, which is my grandmother's house. She and my grandfather built this house 50 years ago. And we used to have what we call Nanny Day Camp. During the summer, you're out of school, you go play, watch TV, sleep all day. Not us. We were in Nanny Day Camp. My grandmother was an educator, so she believed in feeding our minds even though we weren't in school. So we'd go outside and do art projects, and I love to draw, so I draw. And I drew a picture of myself standing in a cemetery in front of a microphone with these bold red lips, and on the side it said, "I am the grave woman."
No way.
I have no recollection of drawing this picture, none whatsoever. And it wasn't until I was about to graduate mortuary school in 2012 that my sister found a scrapbook that my grandmother had made for my high school graduation. And the second page was this picture of myself saying I'm the grave woman. But the craziest part is, Jennifer, I had started a blog in mortuary school as a way to vent called The Grave Woman.
No way.
Yes.
And you've no recollection of
I have
this.
no
Of
recollection. The
drawing.
picture's actually on my Instagram. Yeah, it's the freakiest thing. And it was dated
Wow.
September 11th, 1994, right? Prior to
That's
going to
crazy.
mortuary school, I worked in a cemetery and I started seeing the date 9/11, or the number 9/11. That was my first introduction to numerology. I started seeing 9/11. I started mortuary school in September 2011, which was 9/11.
Oh my
The same
gosh.
number from the photo.
That's crazy. And you know what? I've not nearly as clear of a fortune telling story. That's amazing. Mine is I mean the Glam Reaper was totally given to me by the media, but I actually I'm convinced I was destined for this my whole entire life, because even as a child, when I used to practice my handwriting and then calligraphy and stuff, I practiced an epitaph from a headstone, and I still remember it to this day. It's like a beautiful little poem about well, actually very tragically, like, I mean, I kind of wonder it was about dead children. And
Mm.
it's a beautiful piece. Obviously it's very heartbreaking and sad, but yeah, that's what I used to practice. And then even like, and I joke about this so much, but like then even as a teenager, as most Irish people do, we went to work. You work quite young, I guess, here,
Mhm.
but like 14, 15 years old, and I went to work in a bar, and the
Okay.
bar was called the Morgue.
What?
I know. So, like, not quite the same, but like when I started adding it all up, I was like, wait a second, this
Yes,
is kind of adding up a little bit. So that's amazing. And so what if it wasn't that, what drew you into this business?
definitely. Definitely. So, I had an uncle that was a mortician, and he would come home for holidays, and I would go visit him in Florida for like spring breaks and the weekends and things like that. And he'd answer all my questions. I've always been morbidly curious. Like you probably get it. Like
Yeah.
there's this energy that's in the death care arena that just draws me.
Yeah.
My culture is very centered on death and ancestors and the connection that we have to the afterlife. But my uncle was really, really, really instrumental because he not only answered my questions, but he also took me into the funeral home, took me into the embalming room, took me into the arrangement conferences with him, and let me basically shadow and learn from him. And my first acquaintance with death was through my great grandmother. I remember being a very little child and asking everyone around her or us at the funeral, why is she laying in this bed box? Who put her in there? Who did her makeup? Why are we watching her sleep? If she's asleep, why are we putting her in the ground? Why are we covering her with dirt? So I've always had that curiosity. And then tragically,
Yeah.
a friend, my first best friend, died accidentally. And it's just always been fascinating to me. And so that curiosity and that fascination turned into research, which turned into shadowing my uncle, that turned into, hey, I want to go to the funeral home. Where I grew up, Beaufort, South Carolina, where I live now, my family spent a lot of time in the church, right? And a big part of the mission service that my mother and my grandmothers and aunts did was taking care of people when they were passing away, basically doulaship. But they didn't call it that, and taking care of their families. So, I mean, it's just been all around me my entire life. My dad used to take us to the graveyard to spend time, like have picnics with our ancestors that had passed on. So it's like, I don't know if it's a draw or if it's just a level of existence.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely you hit the nail on the head or the nail in the coffin. As they say that in death care, there is kind of something just innate in us. And what don't want to say irritates me, but what does irritate me a little bit is this idea that we're all goths or that we're all sort of, wear black all the time. We're this kind of, and yeah, sure. That absolutely. There are some of us that are morbid, curious in that way, and that's we wear it, and that's our identity and stuff
Mhm.
like that. But there's also, as I met you at the NFDA, and there's also those of us in pink suits and red lips, and and bright colors, and we're just different. And it's one of the things I get, and I absolutely know from meeting you that you get it, is that people kind of look at you and go, but you're not sad and morbid all the time. You don't whisper. What's going on here? And so yeah, it is. There is that draw within all of us, but we are all so different. And I want to shed more light. Like I've infamously on my Instagram a picture of Lurch from the Adams Family, I think it is, and me in a red dress, roaring, laughing, and
Yes.
it's just the difference, because that's the Lurch in the Adams Family, and oh god, there's a new series now, I think I call Wednesday or whatever, but the Adams Family are back and cool, but like that's what people historically sort of think of when they think of anybody from the funeral community. Now, what is it that you do? What does the grave woman do? You do, and your business. What is it that you provide to people?
Definitely. So I am a licensed mortician, funeral director, embalmer, all of those things. But my practice now is more so on education. I create continuing education courses for funeral directors. I create what I call grief alchemy sessions and courses and workshops for the public. And my mission is really to have open and honest conversation about death and grief. And I refer to myself as a sacred grief practitioner. So it's twofold. I educate the death care community about inclusion, diversity, the spiritual aspect of the work that we do, and about cultural competence. But on the other side, for the families, for the general public, for those that are experiencing loss or just curious about life and death and how to navigate grief in between, I help alchemize loss and grief and turn it into purpose.
Okay. And on your website, you've so many courses and resources, ebooks and things like that that people should definitely check it out. Thegravewoman.com.
Yes,
I think, right? Yes.
that's it.
I always have to double check. My memory's terrible. And yeah, there's lots of really great resources on there. But talk to me a little bit more. obviously, as a female anyway, it's fascinating, was fascinating coming into this industry, I call it funeral community, whatever. How do you feel, like, diversity wise? Like, what's your experience? I'm obviously from Ireland, so I'm fresh if ish to it in the United States, but what are your thoughts, and what teachings do you have to kind of bring to educate people on the funeral community and diversity within it, because it is typically antiquated white male.
It's definitely antiquated white male. I mean, it is what it is. In mortuary school here, we don't learn anything but how to care for white people that
Wow.
celebrate life and funeralize and memorialize their loved ones in a very Eurocentric way. So, for me, as a Black woman coming into this industry, I didn't really have a lot of people to look up to online that look like me, right?
Yeah.
And so, believe it or not, Caitlin was actually the one that encouraged me to make my YouTube channel, turn my blog into a YouTube channel. And I did that, and I realized that there were more people like me. And what I also realized going to mortuary school is that they don't talk about us. They don't talk about our culture. And when I say us, I don't want to place BIPOC individuals into one box, because we're so individual, we're so nuanced. There's so many caveats to who we are as people, right? But there's no care, no educational care for our hair, our makeup, our culture at the end of life. And that's what I bring to the table. I don't know everything, but because of the experience I've had working in the industry for almost 15 years, and because of my experience as a Black woman, I feel like I have the right to speak on those things and shed light on the lack of diversity in the industry. Also, as a woman,
Mhm.
it's, let's just take being a Black woman out of it. Being a woman in this industry was a total culture shock for me,
Yeah.
because remember, I used to go to the funeral home with my uncle, who was a protector, who loved me, who cared about me, experiencing things like sexism, um, sexual advances, unwanted sexual advances from men, or just being told that I couldn't perform this job because I was a woman. Was, it pissed me off, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I know that fire.
Yes.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's wild to me, and it's wild on so many levels. I can only speak from, like, we all can only speak from our own experiences and our own cultural, but it's fascinating to me because originally women were the caretakers of the dead.
Yeah.
And that's what's so fascinating. But it's like money came into it, and suddenly we were shimmied back to the kitchen stove and
Right.
go about your business. And now, from what I'm hearing, we're taking it back. I believe 70% of mortuary school students are women
Yes.
winning. But even, like, to your point, like, it's mind-boggling that in 2022, that in mortuary school, like medical school, like, it's still a part of medicine as far as I'm concerned. It's just the
Yes.
final part. That care and that cultural, exactly as you said, hair alone. I have, uh, it's makeup. Like, most funeral homes that I have visited, I know that they only have the white, ridiculously pale, pasty makeup, and I mean, oh, it's just, it should never have been the case. To be honest, it should never have been that this is all that we have, because the world is so, and it always fascinates me in America, because it's so made up of immigrants,
It
that yet it has honed into this sort of white male, very so uh, I am learning I've never gone through mortuary school because I'm not a funeral director. I'm not a licensed funeral director, nor do I want to be.
right.
And even though I've had people say, oh, you should do it to try and understand, and I'm like, no, that's thank you, but no, that's not my forte, and that's not
Mhm.
where I see my skills or whatever. So I've never been through it. I've obviously read all the books and done all that, but I've never had to sit down and do somebody's makeup and do somebody's hair. And exactly that. I mean, it's crazy to me. So I'm delighted that you're standing up and that so many others are standing up. Because even and we kind of touched on it, but like even sexuality in the workplace, homosexuality, I mean, of all types, but I'm just going to speak on that because I have experience with friends in that. We've got cultural differences and we've got sexual preferences and stuff, and it's just, I need to nearly start saying it's such an antiquated white straight male business, because that's really what it is. And everyone else is sort of made to feel like you're on the periphery and you don't get to vote, you don't get a say. So I think absolutely, the community needs more voices like you. Now, on that, do you find you in sort of the national conventions where we met, and those various different conventions and the annual conventions, do you get a stage? Do you find you're they're open to that, or are they still pushing back on things?
You know what's interesting? This was actually the first year that I attended any conventions. I've been licensed since 2018, in the funeral industry since 2010, but this was my first year attending convention, and I actually attended a workshop, I guess, an open mic session that was hosted by the American Board of Funeral Service Education and the conference exam, which is the exam we have to take here in the States in order to be recognized as a licensee, right? We have to take and pass. And I brought up the fact that their curriculum is basically failing students and failing families because it's non inclusive of culture, race, diversity of any kind. Even Melissa, the modern mortician, spoke up about there not being any green education in mortuary
Mhm.
schools. And we were literally shrugged off by both the American Board of Funeral Service Education and the conference exam. We were shrugged off, literally shrugged off.
Oh God.
So, do I receive recognition or a stage there? No. Um, However, professionals, students, the online community, that's who cares about this message and that's who this message is impacting. And to me, that's really all I care about,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest, because the students want more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. It does sadden me. Like, it's as in, it's great that you're getting their support anyway, but it saddens me that like these national associations aren't kind of giving the stage to people. I don't want to be like, because I actually hate these words that are coming out of my mouth, but like that people that look like you. Like I hate even saying that. Like I kind of want to vomit, but like it's just like to me, like I don't want to. I, I try and kind of keep diplomacy whenever I'm talking to guests, but I do get a bit annoyed, and I've spoken to several um, attendees at the conventions and stuff where I'm like, it just needs to be a bit more diverse. Like there needs to be younger people up there, younger people with more energy. Like I've gone to so many workshops where I'm half falling asleep because not to again using, and I really do, I'm allergic to kind of any of these boxing types, but like the Karens, like, up on stage, and I'm just like, oh my God, Snoresville, like what? There's nothing new with what you're saying. I'm going asleep. Or the guy who's like profusely sweating and, just should not be up there at all. Really frustrating. When there's new people and, you know, um, like, yeah, I don't want to name kind of names to drag them into this conversation because it's not their they're not saying words. I've literally been sitting beside people where I know who have fellow podcasts, and we're all like, "What? There's nothing new in what you're saying here. This is not revolutionary. There's nothing changing." So, that kind of angers me, I have to say. That was a great, if not albeit short, episode of the Glam Reaper podcast. We ran into a few technical difficulties, but we are definitely hoping to get the Grave Woman on again, and maybe even in person. We would love to see her on stage. I definitely think diversity is a huge issue within the funeral community, as it is worldwide, as we know, and we are here for it. We are here to support and do what we can. We would love to hear any thoughts and comments you have in the box below, or just generally contact us or Joelle on social media. We'll leave all the links below. We'll talk to you next time.